Good morning, everyone. This is Jeffy Kennedy, author of Epic Fantasy Romance. I'm here with my first cup of coffee. Ah, delicious. Today is Tuesday, July 26th. Uh, Last working week of July for me, not day, week. Um, yeah, kind of short week for me, as I mentioned yesterday. Tomorrow I fly to a Polycon, a word the transcript cannot handle. and we'll see if I do some podcasts from there or not. We got some rain last night, so everything is looking sprightly this morning, sprightly and happy. And yeah, so I got a lot done yesterday. I was happy with what I got done yesterday. I got a full hour of words in before I even met up with Dorinda. And so I was done by, I could tell you what time I was done by. I love being done early in the day. I was done by 11:30. Had my 2,000 words in by 11:30, and that's just the best. Um, I really love having my words done by noon, and I think mosquito. I think I might have to go back to that kind of schedule. Um, it means getting up earlier. Sorry for the squirming around. If you're on video, the mosquitoes are getting me. Uh, yeah, just really helps me to have words done before noon so that the afternoon is then for business. I hear some writers talk about that they do like writing in the morning and then editing in the afternoon. But for me, editing takes very much the same muscle as drafting. So I think it draws from the same well. So it doesn't work that way for me. Sounds like a nice way to do it. But sorry for the scrape there. I decided to scoot you a little closer so I could sit back and relax. So, one thing that I did make some notes while I was gone of things I wanted to talk about. I was reading a book. I've discovered that it's growing harder and harder for me to talk about the books that I'm reading because, and it may be partly the podcast, because I want to be able to dissect them and talk about what doesn't work for me in them. And I feel I'm torn because I want to support the authors of the books by talking up their books. But then if I'm talking about their books critically, I don't feel like I should say. So I read this book that is by, it's a fantasy romance. The romance was very thin, um, slow burn, and it picks up in the next book. But I didn't care enough to keep going. Um, so that's like not something I would ever want to say publicly about a book. Tell you guys which book it was. Tell you all which book it was. Ongoing effort to cleanse guys from my vocabulary. So, so what I wanted to talk about, I don't need to go down this rabbit hole of this specific book and what worked and what didn't for me. But one thing I want to talk about is being aware, and it's a delicate line to walk, of what your readers want for your characters. And this is, it's dicey, right? Because you don't know. You don't know what your readers want necessarily. But you do have to know or guess, sense there's a certain amount of fan service and satisfying the readers with what they want a character to be able to have and do. And there's a lot of joking that goes around all the time about authors torturing their characters. I shared a meme a little while back that was pretty funny. It was from a movie that I Tohees. Oh, and there's our hummingbird. Uh, it's a lot of activity out here this morning. Sorry, the birds distracted me. So, thinking in terms of the meme. It was from a movie that I recognized but couldn't identify. You know what I mean? But it showed a driver of the car with a manic expression on their face, uh, the car clearly hurtling out of control, and two people in the back seat screaming. And it said, when, oh, I'm not going to do a good job of explaining it. Uh, it said basically, when when a favorite character dies, and it's shows the person driving the car is the author, me, my best friend, screaming in the back seat. I thought it was funny. But there are a lot of jokes about authors torturing their characters, and I see authors talking from time to time about, someone once called me out on that, saying, "See someone talking," but you see somebody talking and writing, right? Uh, you I'm distracted this morning, aren't I? I see authors talking often about how they love to torture their characters, and it never feels that way to me. I'm always on the side of my characters. It, the the world does terrible things to them sometimes, but I'm always on the side of my characters, figuring out how to deal with it. So I feel like I'm riding in the car too. I think that would be more accurate. So I probably should have formulated this idea better before I start talking about it, but I figure out things as I talk about them, just as I figure out things as I write about them. There's a theme there, right? So, so this book, let me go back to my concrete example, that eventually the author did deliver on what I wanted, but there was an extended period of the character being thrust into a role that they did not want, and being unhappy about that and longing for their old life, which is, I mean, that's hero's journey. So, it's certainly a standard trope, resisting the call to action. But as a reader, I really wanted this for this character. I wanted this responsibility, this position, and I didn't like that so many of the other characters. This is another thing about characters being mean to each other, but I'll come back to that, hopefully, if I remember. I didn't like that so many of the other characters were so against this person having this position. Um, and I felt like the world building was a little weak. And I just taught this class for the Clarion Write-a-thon, and I'm going to be teaching it at Worldcon. I just got notice I'm going to be giving this workshop at Worldcon, which is world building from a character-driven perspective. So it's really cool that people want to see this workshop and find it valuable. Basically, it's my approach that setting up the world in order to uh, best put your characters through the crucible, right? So, which I suppose is me driving the car. To be fair, no, it's me picking out the worst possible car. I don't know. We won't spend a lot of time on that analogy. But in this particular book, the there was this sense that the protagonist could not have this position because of their gender. And but the rest of there were elements of that, but then the rest of the world didn't necessarily support this. And this is something I talk about in that workshop a lot. It's like, okay, if you decide that you want females to be second class citizens and because of gender, then first of all, be aware that you are knee jerk mimicking our patriarchal society, uh, which has been, our history has been extensively massaged to support that idea. So be aware of those things. And if you've listened to me for a long time, you've heard me talk about this before. But also know why you're choosing that. I mean, are you choosing that just to sort of keep your female characters down? Um, if there is it just has to be supported. And I realize I'm getting myself into a muddle because I'm trying not to give details. So this is in like an alternate fantasy world where the the lord of the land, which is basically, it's sort of like a feudal, it's kind of like a Victorian England type society. So it's sort of as if the duke were chosen via magical means, and the female protagonist is unexpectedly chosen. And there's a sense of that, no, the world can't, that there's a dueling sense of that, no, she can't be this because she's female, but she has to be this because she's magically chosen. And it was sort of halfway done. It was like, well, be, can can a woman hold this position or not? And I felt like the author just, and it was a first book, so there's something to that. The sun is coming after me here. I have to scoot over. In fact, I think I'll just commit and do that. That's better. So, it's like either females have rights or they don't. Either females can be in positions of power or they can't. And obviously, we're talking a binary here. But so that's one piece. Is like, you when you're creating a world, even if you're creating a world that is a close facsimile of our world or what we believe our historical world to have been, and you all have, if you've listened for a long time, you've heard me talk about the faux medieval fantasy setting, which has very little to do with what the medieval era was actually like. I had one really interesting reader contact me and talk about, gave me some interesting feedback where she, I believe she was a she, her, said that she was an historian and that she could talk about all of this stuff, like of how our um, ideas of what medieval society and culture and daily life were like are so incredibly wrong and have been so extensively massaged and really, oh, what's the word I want? Denigrated, made to seem much, much worse than it was. Anyway, that's another topic. Uh, but I will touch on this, that when you do have a society where rights are based on gender, which does reflect our society, but you have to look at why. And how this is a very, very long, complicated history and how it affects people's interactions, right? Is it exactly against the law or is it custom? In this book, it wasn't clear. Is there a higher law? There wasn't a sense of there being any higher law to the land. Um, it's just, it's not devastating, but it's just slightly weak world building. You know, it's different whether or not things are actually illegal or whether they're custom. Uh, but also, how do if things are very gender based, how do other people react? And this kind of comes around to my thing about characters being mean to each other. I have a problem in books where every character in the book is aligned against the protagonist. And that was not the case in this book, but there were a lot who either were or were just sort of tangentially oblivious. And it's in cases like that, people do form alliances. Like for instance, if females generally don't hold positions of power, and a female is thrust into a position of power uh, by magical decision, the other females are going to have opinions about this. The males are too, but the other females are going to have feelings, and many of those will be feelings of solidarity. And again, if you've listened to me for a long time, you know that it's one of the things that I complain about a lot is when female characters in a story are not supportive of each other, that they don't have real friendships. Uh, I feel like this comes from fiction tropes rather than from real life, because at least I hope, because in real life, especially when rights are threatened, people who are being deprived of those rights band together to protest, right? That's what we're seeing. We see it with Black Lives Matter. We see it with the protests against the overturn of Roe versus Wade in the US. The other people who are being similarly oppressed are going to have feelings about this. And I realize that in a fantasy story, you may not want to get into all of that, but it has to be part of that world building iceberg, right? There's that great diagram with the tip of the iceberg being like the things that show in the story, but then there's all that stuff underneath. So, so yeah, I think. But then the other piece is, and I talked about this in that workshop as well, is being aware of what your reader wants for that person and what your reader is bringing to the page. Because one person asked me if there were tropes I felt like were outdated world building tropes. And I said, well, like one that I personally have a lot of trouble with is the fantasy story where the female characters are not allowed to have the education, where they're not allowed to go to the academy, where they're, not allowed to get XYZ. And yes, I know I have written this with Chronicles of Desnaria, that women are universally not taught anything, even how to count. And I did that for very specific reasons. But and I made it extreme on purpose for that reason. Because when a reader picks up a book where the female characters are not allowed to go to university, where they're otherwise educated but not allowed to go to university, it begins to feel a little unsupported. It, it's hard for us to identify because, well, I know there are parts of the world where females are denied education. It's pretty rare now. And so it's a leap. You want to keep in mind what your reader wants for the character. And in my case, I really wanted my character to be to seize this opportunity and not be all, oh, woe is me, I wish I had my old life back. I'll allow a little bit of it, but then I wanted, and eventually that change did happen. Um, but I wanted, I wanted more, and maybe more would come in the subsequent books. So Uh, that may have been a slightly muddled explanation. I'll keep thinking about it. But maybe I'll weave it into the world building from a character driven perspective workshop at Worldcon if you're going to Worldcon, or which you should be able to attend virtually as well. And I'm realizing that I should have led with this. Today's release day for Rogue's Possession. Woohoo! So it's out in the world now. Um, so now you can buy the first two books, and third book comes out in a few weeks, which means I need to get my act together and make my tweaks on it. So it's weird having these releases of books that I've already written because it feels like I don't know. It's slightly anticlimactic, but I'm really pleased at how well these books are selling. It's great to see a book that's been out for 10 years finding new readers. So on that note, I'm going to go do a few release day things, and I am going to get more words and get ready to fly to Worldcon tomorrow. If you're going to be there and you see me, uh, please say hi. Would love that. Every once in a while, uh, I talked to this gal online, and she said, I rode in an elevator with you at a conference, and I wanted to say hi, but I was too shy. I was like, oh, please don't be shy. Am I try to be nice. I think I'm nice. I love talking to people, so do say hi. And I will maybe talk to you all on Thursday, maybe on Friday, probably not on Monday because I have jury duty, right? So certainly a week from today, if nothing else. You all take care. Bye bye.